Hey y'all, this is OD from On the Air Sickle. Have you been enjoying On the Air Sickle lately? Want to get your story on the air like these people? Check out our new On the Air Sickle website, where you can share your stories live on the air. Hello, everybody. Welcome to On the Air Sickled. This is the podcast that promotes the good, the bad, and the ugly, all in the name of awareness and advocacy. You're listening to On the Air Sickled. Listen, today is an awesome show for you all. This is not our normal style. You're listening to episode 6, Working Out the Cells. Our special guest is going to be our On the Air Sickle Wellness Consultant, Miss Jena Olsen. Before she comes on, I want to make sure that I do justice and let you all know that Divine Concept Group is having a conference, which you saw the commercial. I will be speaking at the event. It's next weekend. It's a 3-day event. You are more than welcome to attend. Please register at DCGC OB Conference 2023 at eventbrite.com. You want to make sure that you sign up because we need to make sure to know who all is going to be there and how many people we need to prepare for. So please make sure that you are there. Again, if you would like to get on the show, please go to our website. You can see our website at www.ontheairsickle.com. Hit the share my story link, and you can see yourself next on the air. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring in our On the Air Sickle Wellness Consultant, Miss Jena Olsen. You are next on the air. Hey, Jena, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Hey, thanks for joining us. It has been a roller coaster ride, going show to show, presenting information to our audience. Uh, this one I'm really excited about because you're actually going to be doing a presentation for us, giving us some information on physical activity. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got your information, and what we should be expecting on today's show.
Sure. So I am a clinical exercise physiologist. I've been in the field for about 21 years now. I started off getting my master's in clinical exercise physiology and working in a hospital setting doing cardiac and pulmonary rehab for people with comorbidities, but to include just acute cardiac and pulmonary issues or surgeries. And then I've worked for a lot of different health promotion for corporations, different businesses. I've been a trainer for 21 years, a personal trainer working with people with different disease processes. And then my current job, which is a mix of everything, as we know, at Westminster. So that's what brought me here. And as far as my information, all of my exercise physiology information, of course, are things that I know. And I did a lot of extra research on sickle cell so that I was sure to bring to you what I could find to be the most up-to-date and newest things as far as physical activity and people with sickle cell disease, but also those that just have sickle cell trait. So it's going to be a little bit talking about both of those things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm just excited. I have my notebook ready because y'all, just so that you all know, I did not look at the presentation outside of looking to see how many slides they were. So I'm going to be learning right along with everybody else and asking questions as Jena explains what she has presented before us. So this will just be a roller coaster ride and enjoyable presentation for everyone. All right, Jena, you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get the presentation going. All right.
All right. So I thought first, before we really delve into, sickle cell in particular, I wanted to just give a brief little overview of what happens in our body when we're exercising. So a little bit of the general physiology that occurs. And so, of course, we know when we're exercising, we get an increase in heart rate. Our adrenaline levels rise, which stimulates the heart to beat faster. Our capillaries in the muscles open wider, which helps to increase the blood flow to our working muscles up to 20 times. That will become important to note when I start talking about how it impacts people with sickle cell disease. So when we talk about increasing that blood flow to the muscles, what happens is some vasodilation. So it opens up a little bit to bring more O2 to the muscles. You can also say that blood is diverted from our organs at that time to help push more of the blood to what we need to the muscles. So it goes away from liver and our digestive system and things like that. With the increase in heart rate, we get an increase in blood pressure when we first start to exercise. It will even out, but the first thing that happens is it raises to meet the demands of what you're doing. So you're pushing that blood and oxygen to the muscles, to the lungs, to the heart, to get it working more. There's an increase in your breathing rate, of course, and the depth. Your intake to get more oxygen in relies on that increase of breathing rate and the depth of your lungs inhaling the oxygen. And then some other things that are going on, all those happy chemicals are released in your brain, which is why it's so good for your mental health to exercise along with your physical. We got the serotonin and the dopamine, which is released in the brain, the happy chemicals. Your body temperature increases as our blood flow increases. And I wanted to note that, sweat is our body's way of cooling off. So we sweat when we exercise, hopefully. And it's actually the quicker you sweat during exercise, for your own body. We're all a little different. So you can't really compare, like I couldn't compare myself to Otmar, but for myself, the earlier that you start sweating is actually more efficient. And so it's like a level, you can almost tell your level of fitness by how quickly your body gets efficient at cooling itself down. So sweating is actually a good thing. That's why our body does it. It helps cool us off. You can go on. Next slide. All right. So most of you know this, but I wanted to just go over it. When you have sickle cell anemia, the normal red blood cells are sickle in shape. And it's because of this HEBS, which is that abnormal form of the hemoglobin protein. And because of the sickle cell shape, it decreases the ability of the red blood cells to carry oxygen and move through the capillaries because it can get stuck when they clump together, those sickled cells. So this becomes very important to understand why it's harder for people with sickle cell disease and sometimes with sickle cell trait to really exercise in higher intensities, because their ability to bring oxygen to those muscles is impaired, and then you're at risk for going into a crisis. Next. All right, so a couple things off the bat to note is that people with sickle cell disease usually have fewer blood vessels in their muscle tissue to begin with, which is preventing that oxygen delivery that is needed. And of course, our sickled cells, they can't carry the oxygen properly anyway. So this makes it harder for those muscles to function at peak capacity because you're not getting as much oxygen to the muscles. And then the body's ability to thermoregulate to keep your body in that homeostasis is also hindered for people with sickle cell disease. So you're battling a couple different things here going on physiologically that people without sickle cell disease don't have to battle with. All right, so I'm going to skip over this little first part because I'm going to talk about it in a second. No, you know what? I'll just go into it. So I actually have a slide next for, I think it's a really good video explaining exertional sickling. This is for people that have this trait, sickle cell trait, not sickle cell disease. But what can happen when people with the trait start exercising, if they raise to a certain level during exercise, a certain peak performance level, because of what's going on, their cells can start to sickle and raise the amount of sickled cells that they have. So that's somebody with the trait that we're going to talk about how, that impacts the ability of the body to really do a higher intensity activity. Not in all people with sickle cell trait, but it's definitely something that can happen and does happen. And because of that increased blood flow during exercise, that's when people with sickle cell disease or people with the trait that have started this exertional sickling run the risk of those cells sticking together and causing occlusion. And if it happens in the wrong place, it can definitely lead to cardiac events and, of course, crisis. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How can we best get the benefits of exercise and reducing that risk of having any of these complications? So we definitely want to avoid, people with sickle cell disease want to avoid that high intensity interval training. This is an activity which spikes your blood pressure and your heart rate very, very quickly. So it's all the rage. You'll hear HIIT training, not the best form of exercise, okay? For people with sickle cells, because what can happen is it's taking your body, it's almost like a shock to your body, and everything's going super fast, and you might run that risk of going into a crisis. So low to moderate intensity. Oh, sorry, Otmar, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to know. So with the high intensity interval training, if I guess doing exercises sporadically creates a pathway to having a crisis, would you say then that there are like workout exercises or warm-up exercises that we should do to kind of get there?
Right, absolutely. So what HIIT training is, just to make it a little bit clearer here, is it's not just sporadic exercise. It is basically you're going all out. It's if you can picture a sprint. So usually when you're talking HIIT training, you're talking about 20 seconds all out, full body exertion to your peak, and then you rest. You have a negative rest interval. So then you'd have like 10 seconds off, and then you're going full blast again. So that's what HIIT training is. And what you're talking about is, yes, you definitely want to gradually go into exercise, but that's with any program. Even people that do HIIT training need to make sure they're warmed up before they go into this type of training. But certainly with sickle cell disease, for any exercise program, and we're going to talk about some of those here, you definitely want to take your time, warm up very slowly using your major muscle groups, whether that's a slow walk. We'll talk about that a little bit before you get into your exercise. Now, as far as stretching before, you don't ever want to stretch a cold muscle. So you're not going to stretch before you warm up. You always want to warm up first and do your exercises and then stretch at the end. But that being said, people that have sickle cell disease and many, many, many other, I want to be clear that this is not just for sickle cell disease, but there's many other clinical conditions where low to moderate intensity exercise is truly best. You're still going to get all of the good benefits that we're talking about. You don't have to be going at 90% of your max heart rate, to get the benefits. So, in a lot of cases, a lot of clinical issues, we talk about this low to moderate intensity exercise being kind of where you want to be. Except, we're going to talk about later too, elite athletes and things like that. And going on, avoiding the excessive heat or excessive cold temperatures when exercising is so important. People with sickle cell disease, but also for people with heart disease, lung problems, diabetes, high blood pressure. It's just, you really don't want to exercise in these extremes because it makes your body work a lot harder. Now, people with sickle cell disease, where they run into a bigger problem, not only can they not cool down when it's hot, but if you go from a hot environment to a cold environment, what can happen is your blood vessels constrict very quickly, and it'll slow that flow of blood down and cause those sickled cells to stick together and can cause occlusion. So, you want to certainly avoid exercising in the heat, but you also don't want to be going out there running in the middle of winter either. So, you're trying to just really be in that moderate zone. And what I have read over and over and over with sickle cell disease is how important hydration is. If there is one thing that is in the literature over and over and over again, it is the hydration is so important. And so, that looks like hydrating, not just while you're exercising, but being hydrated before. And with athletes that are doing a little bit, more intense things, staying hydrated throughout the week. You're hydrating the day before an event. You're not just hydrating. And that is one of the most important things you can remember, is to stay hydrated. And then, of course, wear loose fitting clothing, light loose fitting clothing. And it has to be said, I have to say this all the time before starting any new exercise program, and this is for anybody, make sure you talk to your doctor first, just to make sure that they have cleared you to start an exercise program. All right. So this is what I was talking about, and it's going to explain it a little bit better. I really liked this video on it. So for people with sickle cell trait, they can go their whole life and they can be asymptomatic. But where the risk is, and we're going to talk about why there's testing for the NCAA for sickle cell trait and why the military tests for the trait. And it's because you're at higher risk for certain exertional problems. So this is going to talk about it a little bit. Are you able to play that, Otmar?
We're going to see.
Can you not click on it?
Yeah, no, I'm not able to play it, but that's okay. What we'll do is after the show is over, I'll get the video and then we'll make sure that this is aired on all of our platforms.
Okay. And like I said, I can just talk about it a little bit then instead. And basically, this is something that can happen. And again, it does not happen to everybody with sickle cell trait. But in some people with sickle cell trait, you run the risk of this exertional sickling. So when you go into a higher intensity of exercise, such as you would find in, college sports, professional sports, things like that, it can cause people with the trait to have their cells start to sickle. And then they can go into crisis where they've never really had a problem before. And again, this is also why it's really important to talk to your primary care before you start an exercise program. But, this video just kind of, if you get a chance to look at it later, it'll explain it a little bit more in depth than I just did. But, this is something that they're now watching for a little bit more closely now that we're understanding what's going on. Why were these people that were completely asymptomatic all of a sudden having this problem? All right. So here we're just talking about, Otmar, you had asked me, what kind of program should I be doing? Could you give an example of a program? Well, really, programming, especially clinical programming, is so personal to the person, because to give anybody a true program, I would need to get full medical history, figure out all the ins and outs, not just with sickle cell, but with everything else going on, and your exercise history, all that. So I can't really give you this is a workout program to follow, because it's not generalized. That would be, you can get those online and things like that. And if you have any kind of chronic disease or clinical issue, I highly recommend seeing somebody that can get you started on the right foot, that knows what they're doing. But so here are the types of exercise programs that are recommended. Basically, those low to moderate intensity cardiovascular exercise. What does that mean? It's the aerobic. So walking, as you did your walk challenge, is a fantastic exercise for everybody, regardless. But it's really great for the cardiovascular health of somebody with sickle cell disease, because you're still getting your aerobic capacity, you're strengthening your heart muscle, but you're not going at that intensity that might push you over the edge. Zumba, you can certainly do Zumba, light jogging and cycling. And I say light. So, when you have something that you're dealing with, it's very important to pay attention to your own body. If you're doing a Zumba class, you just got to modify to what you are capable of doing. If the person beside you is jumping like a crazy person and doing the salsa at like 1,000,000 miles per minute, you may not be doing that, but you can still participate and just do it a little slower. For people that have been jogging, light jogging is fine. If you need to stop and take walking breaks, do that. And same with cycling. And I wanted to mention resistance training. You could do weightlifting, but functional training is also very good. What that means is using your own body weight, right? So you're using your own body weight to do your exercises, which can look like push-ups or, you could do ab stuff. The thing with sickle cell disease is that you just don't want to push too much. So you're going to be using whatever you're doing it at a little bit lighter weight, and you're doing more reps if you're going to do that. And if you're doing body weight, like squats, things like that, You just want to make sure that you're taking a break long enough in between your sets that your body can recover. Again, you don't want to turn it into a high intensity workout where you're pushing, and don't give yourself the break. So, light weights, more reps is kind of where you want to be with that. But, you might be saying, why should I be doing this when there's a risk of me going into crisis or a risk of me having, a serious health event? And everything that we talked about is we want to mitigate that risk as much as possible, but still give you these benefits. And there are a lot of benefits. They've actually been finding that when people with sickle cell disease, that working out and doing your exercise can actually help to bring more capillaries, nutrients, blood flows to your muscle. So you're actually improving something where we know that people with sickle cell disease don't have as many in their muscles, but when you start an exercise program, something you stick at, it can actually increase the amount of red blood cells, increase the amount of capillary activity in your muscles so that you're getting more oxygen to your muscles. And, of course, it's going to help significantly improve your overall muscle function, overall physical ability, and it improves sleep, concentration, memory, mood. Lowers your risk of heart disease, diabetes, stroke, cancer. Of course, when we're talking about stroke, I need to be very careful to mention that is why we need to be a little bit reserved if you have sickle cell disease. And it can lower your blood pressure overall. So not just while you're exercising, but on a steady state. If you are doing regular physical activity, it helps to lower your blood pressure. And fueling your body. I'm sure Otmar is going to have somebody on that talks. It is a nutritionist that can give the full, but I have to at least say it. I wouldn't tell somebody to do an exercise program and not mention fueling your body. Important thing to note is that people with sickle cell disease have a much higher cellular metabolism. And so they're burning energies and calories faster than those who do not have sickle cell disease. And so what does that mean? It means you need to be eating a higher calorie diet, not of cake and cookies necessarily, a higher calorie diet that is nutritionally dense. So you want high in vitamins and minerals, veggies, fruits, whole grains, lean meats, proteins, things like that. So you're needing to take in almost 3 times the amount of macronutrients that somebody without sickle cell disease needs. So if you're starting an exercise program, you're going to really need to be cognizant of your nutrition, because your body then is going to need it even more to make it to fuel your body for that exercise. And so, in sickle cell anemia, nutrients are quickly diverted away from bodily processes that support growth and other essential functions to make more healthy red blood cells. So that, is kind of where that whole calorie thing comes in. And you also, in general, and again, this goes for the entire population of people, but it's just that when you have sickle cell disease, you need to be on top of your game, your nutrition, your hydration, everything like that, just so much more, because it's so important. So you want to reduce the inflammation as much as possible. And we talk about anti-inflammatory foods, your omega-3s, berries, walnuts, almonds, leafy green vegetables, things that are anti-inflammatory is so important. A lot of disease process is because of body's overall inflammation. And just being in the field that I'm in, it is impactful for every type of disease. All right. So, having been an NCAA athlete myself, and having many student athletes I'm surrounded by, I was a Division I athlete at Pitt, and it got me really thinking. I thought, certainly there are the people there that had sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait. Not that I would ask my friends that, but and so I got curious about it. And then I wanted to know, well, what does the NCAA do? What is their regulation for it? And so actually just happened last year, August 1st, 2022, all new student athletes, including those who just try out, must be tested for sickle cell trait or show proof of a prior test. So if you've already, had it, you don't need a new test. Now, people that already are in the system, NCAA, prior to 2022, they don't need to do that because they've signed a waiver. There used to be, there was a sickle cell waiver that the athlete could sign saying, I'm aware of the risks and I'm doing it anyways, kind of thing. And so just like anything else that we were talking about, it's extremely important for an NCAA athlete or any athlete, doesn't have to be NCAA, to be followed closely by a physician and really be on top of your health. You know your body best. You know when your body is starting to send you signals that something's not right. It's extremely important to pay attention to that. You want to have that slow, steady increase in physical activity and avoid those sudden increases of intensity, like I was talking about earlier, which can be hard when you're in a team setting and you're in football and, football training before the season starts is super intense, just as most of the athletic training programs are. So it's not that you can't do it though, but there has to be, and your coach has to know, and you have to be on top of saying, need to back off. Or it's super hot out there today. This would not be a smart decision for me. And, most coaches are going to be, please, don't. Nobody wants anybody to be hurt or injured. But I also want to make clear that just because you have the disease does not preclude you from doing this. You just have to be, unfortunately, you can't be one of these athletes that maybe like me that didn't hydrate and just, carelessly ate whatever I wanted. You unfortunately have to be, not unfortunately, but you really have to be on top of your hydration, your health, your nutrition, every little thing you got to be very careful and pay attention to. So you don't have the privilege of being reckless is basically what it is. So many people take for granted their bodies, and most healthy people, young, healthy adults, can get away with certain things that when you have sickle cell disease, it's just not a gamble you want to play with. And again, I'm just going to repeat that: hydration. If you are on a traveling team, you want to make sure you have plenty of time to acclimate to new environments, because if you're going up to higher altitude, which happens, like if you're playing an event in, Denver, Colorado, it's totally different than playing an event down at sea level. And so you're going to be the guy that needs to get there earlier before the team probably, and just take a few days to acclimate. And what I found just from looking, they're willing to work with you. You're an athlete, you're a good athlete, they're going to work with you. Oh, I guess we can't play this either. Okay, so I'll talk about it. So this is Billy Garrett Jr. He played Division I basketball. He had sickle cell disease. And I really liked this because, it was an interview they did with him, but also with his parents, and talking about how he almost turned away from it. He did have a really serious crisis when he was pursuing kind of his student athlete career. and he was out for weeks, and he really wanted to kind of say, okay, maybe this is not for me. His parents were actually the ones that said, no, we're here, we're going to get you the best thing and you're going to keep going. And he did. And one of the things that he was talking about was just, as I was saying, he had to really kind of, trial and error for a while. He pushed himself to a limit, and then he would learn what was going to set him off and what was going to do that. So for him, it was a little bit of trial and error. But once he got through that, he claims that he really has been able to stay away from getting into a crisis, any major crisis. He went on to play for the New York Knicks just for a little bit. He was actually on the reserve roster, played for them, and then now he plays for a professional Polish league, believe it or not. But he was such an interesting. I also have another. I have another YouTube link in the at the bottom of my presentation that you should look at. It's another interview when he's older. So this was when he was playing in his college years, this video here, but there's another one when he was older and going through that I thought was really interesting. He was talking about it, and just really an inspiration. And I thought it was, his parents were super supportive. I just thought it was a really good thing to watch. So if you have kids going through sports, it's just a good thing to watch. All right. So again, my little mind goes crazy, and the military actually did a fair amount of studies, not the military, but CDC and things like this, because basically it kind of all started back in 1968. There were 4 Marine recruits with sickle cell trait. So they didn't have the disease, they had the trait, who died during training exercises. They were at elevations. So again, they were probably at a higher altitude. But because of that, the Navy medicine began testing all of the recruits and limiting the operational billets available for those who tested positive for the trait. Now, unfortunately, if you have sickle cell disease, it does preclude you from being in the military. But if you have trait now, the different branches have different basically requirements. And the Army is really the only one. They just started testing last year, the Army. But they will not preclude you if you have sickle cell trait from certain types of branches. And this has been very questionable. Is it right to test everybody going in the military for sickle cell trait when there's such a small percentage of people that end up having a problem? It's kind of, I don't know, it's one of those things that, is it something that absolutely has to happen? I have my personal feelings on it. I feel like if you yourself know your health and your history, then you can be there for yourself and, certainly tell your medical doctors. I'm not sure the military has to know if you have a trait, but so now all the Marine recruits have a battery of blood testing done on day 3 of training by staff at Branch Health Clinic. And the results are then sent to the medical dispositions officer for review. And the Navy pointed out if a recruit shows more than 45% of that hemoglobin S, so the one gene that can determine whether or not when you have trait, you only have one of the genes. When you have the disease, you have both. But if you have a certain percentage, so if you have above 45% of that hemoglobin, then a recruit will be separated from training from a condition is disqualifying, but it's not a disability. So it's interesting. I don't know how I feel about it or how the sickle cell community feels about that. But you can go on to the next
really
one.
Interesting. That's interesting because I know when I was younger, I actually went to, I I guess, a military reserve place. And I had always heard, if you have sickle cell, then you can't go into the military. But I was like, yeah, let me, try my hand, because I really wanted to serve. But it just wasn't. The recruiters saw sickle cell on there, and they were like, whoa.
Yeah.
But it is good to know that that there is something being done, so to speak, about getting information regarding sickle cell in the military.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I really wanted to look into it was because basic training, things like that, going to war zones where the heat is in excess
Very
of 100
stressful.
degrees. Not a safe environment for somebody with sickle cell disease. So it got me thinking. And then when I was researching about even the sickle cell trait, I found that interesting. I did not, because I was researching this stuff, did not know that some of the branches actually will disqualify you if you have over that 45%, even if you just have the trait, even if you've been asymptomatic, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, and just because you're asymptomatic for a certain time period of your life, or maybe a majority of your life, doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have, a flare up at some point. So
exactly. All right. So like I was starting to say, the US Army didn't do this screening. They were like the last holdouts. Go Army. And then they finally started testing in 2021. And again, I think it is important. Like, you may have gone your whole life without knowing you had the trait. And so, I've been at a lot of conferences talking about whether athletes should be tested for different heart conditions, different diseases before they're allowed to be in, to play a sport. And it's very controversial. But, and then you look on the other hand, well, it may save a life, so it's kind of one of those things that are just, knowing. But the Army, of course, is saying, we're not going to stop you from, if you have sickle cell trait, we're not stopping you from serving, but it's making sure that we're giving you the proper care. And I do think that that is very important because, military has a way. And I think that there should be special precautions taken for people that have an underlying, condition. So I went on to say that low oxygen levels, which can occur during the strenuous exercise of boot camp, are among the conditions that could cause harm to those with sickle cell trait. And those symptoms are fatigue, extreme thirst, headache, confusion, dizziness, which is also, by the way, symptoms of a lot of other different things that could be going on. So identifying soldiers with the sickle cell trait helps the commanders identify regular exhaustion versus, if you know that this soldier has sickle cell trait, you're going to say, oh, this is not normal. This is not somebody who's just dehydrated or has worked out too much. There might be something going on, and can maybe help during those training protocols. But here's the thing. Studies have shown, that when universal precautions are taken place to the exertion level, the heat, the dehydration, all these things that I'm talking about, there's really not evidence of an increase in mortality rate for those with sickle cell trait versus those without. So, they're doing all these things. And I, had read a couple things that was just like, we may be saving like 1 to 2 people per 300 with sickle cell trait. Is it worth all the testing? Is it worth that? But, the military basically said, yeah, it is, if we can save one person. So, but this is another thing. I've put a lot of links in here. So if people want to go read more about it or actually see the studies or, see what I'm talking about and get more in-depth information, you can do that. So, good old military, they love to do their studies. And this one is one that I thought was interesting. It was all talking about that exertional heat illness, like I was talking with the athletes, the exertional sickling. So the risk of this exertional heat illness was 33% higher for those with sickle cell trait than those that were negative for sickle cell trait. Okay, so 33% higher risk of having an exertional heat illness. So it means that approximately 1/3 of those with sickle cell trait may experience a exertional heat illness. There is significantly higher risk for rhabdomyolysis among Black soldiers with sickle cell trait on active duty in the U.S. Army. However, I liked this, the ability to have the same cardiopulmonary fitness level did not differ. So basically what they're saying is somebody with sickle cell trait can still achieve the same fitness level as somebody without it, which I think is important to note. But you run the risk of that rhabdomyolysis, which rhabdo occurs when damaged muscle tissue releases these proteins and electrolytes into the blood. And these certain amounts, if you have too much higher amounts of these proteins and electrolytes, it can start to damage really quickly. I mean, it can happen very quickly, your heart, kidneys, and cause permanent disability or even death. And I just want to mention something here because yes, they're mentioning this because of sickle cell trait. But, you know, right when some of these CrossFit gyms started opening up, so we're talking about at the beginning here, and people didn't really know as much. But what was interesting was when they started coming out, people are getting into the ERs having rhabdo, and they actually had a term for it, and I can't remember now for the CrossFitters that were getting rhabdo. And the reason why was they were having people that were not, you know, used to exercising at all. And I have a friend, this happened to her, decided to join a CrossFit gym because that was the fad. And I said to her, you know, this isn't a smart idea because you haven't even been walking, and now you're going to join a CrossFit gym and jump right into this highly competitive environment where you are pushing to the max, right? Sure enough, she went into rhabdo. She did not have any underlying, you know, sickle cell trait. She did not have any underlying illness, nothing else presented. And she ended up throwing off her electrolytes so badly that she was presenting in the hospital as if she was having a heart attack. Her creatinine levels were so high. So it had actually started to damage her heart. And this was within 2 weeks of starting. So it's a real thing, and it can happen to people that don't even have an underlying illness if you push your body so fast and hard before it's ready. So imagine now having that sickle cell trait and maybe getting that exertional sickling we're talking about, and ending up with this. You know, it's just not something you want to play around with. So that is one thing that needs to be looked at. But again, if you take those universal precautions, if you are staying hydrated, if you're paying attention and you're not doing what my friend did and go and start deadlifting, you know, 1,000,000 miles per minute when she hasn't even been exercising at all, you know, you just don't want to go from 0 to 100. And so that's something to look at. All right. So I'm just wanting to finish off this military thing. So to wrap that up, currently the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps screen all accessions for disqualifying hemoglobin disorders and mandate dismissal of all individuals whose HbS concentration exceeds 45%. Whereas the Army, they started screening, but they'll screen for certain of the occupational specialties, aviation, diving, special ops type things, but does not consider sickle cell trait a disqualifying condition. So they're testing for it, but they are not going to dismiss you if you have it. They're just going to watch you closely. All right, so this is when I open it up. I know that was a lot. It's like drinking from the fire hose. I'm just like dumping all this information. But does anybody have any questions?
All right, so we have a question here. How can those who need a hip and knee replacement still stay active? Pilates?
Yeah, so gosh, I work with these people all the time. So many people that needing hip and knee. And so it depends. There's certain exercises that are safer. They're non-impact exercises. You do not want to, if you have bone-on-bone knee or bone-on-bone hip, you're not going to be the one that's walking on a treadmill, or you're certainly not going to be jogging. You don't want to be jumping. But in general, for people like this, you can still do like a lot of times when I had people that were waiting sometimes they had to lose weight before their doctor would even permit them to get a knee replacement. I had this a lot in my last 21 years. We would start off slow. And I put them on a bike. I put them on an upright bike. You really don't want to be on a recumbent most of the time because of the angle in the knee that you need to get, the flexion or the hip. But if you're on an upright bike, so start off minimal resistance, but it's a non-impact. Okay. And there's other things you can do too, but that's just an example. So people that are looking at bicycle indoor though, cycle in a gym, not outdoors, is going to be your best friend.
Awesome. See, do we have another question? Okay. Do they test everyone for the trait, or is it specific races? So I think that question is going for the military.
What's that? Oh, okay. Yeah. Testing for the traitors or for specific races. That's the interesting and controversial part that's going into that. For what I was reading, and I was delving into it. I want to say that they should be testing everybody. I know that they have a battery of blood tests that happen when you go to join the military. I just can't say this with 100% conviction because I could not find it. So I can't say it with 100%, and I will keep looking and I can tell you. But I believe it was probably added to the battery of testing because it is extensive when you go into the military. It's like, your body is now the military's. So I don't know. I would like to say, because as we know, it's not all African American. There are other populations that have sickle cell trait. So I would like to think it was everybody.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely important for that to be alarmed, for everybody, broadcasted for everybody to understand that, sickle cell disease is a blood disorder. So if you carry blood, there is potential for you to have the trait or disease. And if you just think about, how many people, have mixed marriages or whatever the case may be, as far as the race is concerned, sickle cell can very well be in your bloodline and you may have no idea. So it's important for everyone to just be tested, and
that's why,
make sure that you're confident in.
Yeah, that's why I want to say educationally and knowing the military as much as I can know the military, I would guess it's just a part of the standard testing. But can I be sure? No, because I couldn't find anything that was said specifically. It just said they started testing for sickle cell trait. So I would like to assume that means that everybody's tested.
Awesome. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? What is an example of how someone with sickle cell who has never worked out before start their workout journey?
All right. So number one, as I mentioned, talk to your doctor first. If they say, yeah, and they're probably going to tell you, absolutely, you should be exercising. And I say that because it's almost for every underlying illness or chronic disease, the doctor says, please exercise. So they're probably going to give you the go ahead. My advice, of course, being in the field I'm in, is meeting with somebody that knows what the heck they're doing. And that does not just mean going into LA Fitness and having a certified personal trainer there. You really got to look at the certifications they have. That's something that I tell everybody. a trainer is not a trainer is not a trainer. Somebody that has a clinical background, somebody has some exercise physiology. Because what they're going to do is take in a full history, get to know you, get to know what you're doing. And they're going to be able to tell you, okay, here's where we're going to start off, and you also do some testing, some baseline testing. But if you're somebody that's like, Jena, I can't just go hire a trainer, that's just not feasible. Then the easiest thing I can say to do is you want to build up what we call the base, I would say a base fitness level. So starting with that walking is a great place to start. Start off slow, start off building up. So you're building up that kind of aerobic cardiovascular base before you were to start throwing in other things. So start there before you would start adding in other, we want to get you active first and being mindfully exercising on a regular basis before starting more than that.
Jena, would you say that the pace matters? I mean, if we're just taking something as simple as walking, and if we're really trying to get the workout, this is working out the cells after all. Is it a gradual increase in the walking pace? Is it simply walking? What's your recommendation?
So you're absolutely looking at intensity. When you're talking about exercise, you're talking about intensity, and there's different things that go into that. So when we're speaking of walking, we're talking about incline and your pace. Both of those things are going to affect the intensity of your exercise. So if you're walking in a hilly neighborhood, it's completely different than if you're walking on a flat track. So what you want to look at is if somebody's just starting, I tend to be on the conservative side and say, hey, let's get you starting at like 40 to 60% of your max heart rate. And nobody here, unless you're a elite athlete, is probably going to go have VO2 max testing done so that you know exactly what that is. But there is a calculation that you can do, and I can share that later if somebody wants to know what their heart rate zone should be. But there's also medications that affect your heart rate. So it depends on what kind of medications you're on. So I also talk about a rating of perceived exertion. Okay. It's a scale. And in general, I like to keep it simple. So if you're thinking of 1 to 10, 1 being, you're sitting on the couch, and 10 being the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. When you start something like that, you want to be at you want it to be about a 4 when you're in the peak of that exercise. So when you start walking, you're not jumping to a 4. You're going to start slow, start warming up, but then you want to maintain a 4 or 5 for 20 to 30 minutes eventually once you work up to that, and then cool down. So definitely want to look at that intensity. That's what we talk about when we talk about doing heart rate zones. But rating of perceived exertion, if you're on any kind of medication that's a beta blocker, anything like that suppresses it, you can't go by heart rate.
Gotcha. I think we have a few more questions. There you go. Can someone with sickle cell lift weights for muscle gain?
So you can, but that's where it gets tricky. It's a very slow increase. Somebody that does not have sickle cell disease, it's a little bit easier to make muscle gain because you can go heavy weights, low reps, and really start to bulk muscle. With people with sickle cell disease, you can still do that, build muscle, but you've got to do it very slowly because your muscles aren't getting all that oxygen that you need. And it certainly won't get the oxygen you need if you're going at that, if you're jumping up in weight really fast and doing max effort. You don't want to do that. The last thing you want to do is stress out your muscles. So it's light weights, more reps, starting slowly, taking the breaks. But you can over time. It's almost like a slow, gradual burn.
What's a beneficial, I guess, gap of a break to ensure that a person with sickle cell gets the workout that they need versus, maybe the break is too long and it's not doing their body any good?
Right. So again, I do this person to person, but in generally speaking, I would almost start out for a person with sickle cell disease. Now, if somebody that did not have sickle cell disease or sickle cell trait or any other underlying clinical issue, you know, I would not do it this way. If they came to me and said, I want to build muscle, I would have them doing 3 to 4 sets of heavy weights, lower reps, right in a row. Like, so if you're doing biceps, you're going to do all your sets right in a row. Now, somebody else that might be dealing with other things, I would almost suggest doing it in a circuit. And what that looks like is you're going to do, say you're going to do a set of squats, and then you're going to go do a set of biceps, and then you're going to go do your triceps, and then you're going to go do some lunges. You're going to go around, and that'll be one set. You're going to do a whole set like that. And then you go back to the beginning and do it again. And the reason for that is that you're building up that all over body fitness, and you're still gaining strength. You're just not going to do it as fast as, if you didn't have to do it that way, but it's really the safest way to do it.
You're not putting as much pressure on one part of the body consistently.
Correct. But you're still going to build muscle, and you're going to get stronger. It's just not the bulking that would happen if you went in there and did your, pre-workout drink with all the caffeine in it and protein and started, lifting heavy weights. But you can still get stronger. You can still build muscle. It's just at a slower pace.
Awesome. How many days per week is acceptable for working out? How many downtime days for rest?
So if you're doing resistance training, so weights, body functional, like push-ups, sit-ups, things like that, lunges, jacks, whatever, you want a day off in between for rest. And if you're just starting out, 2 days a week of resistance training. Start with 2, then bump it to 3 eventually. But you definitely need a day off for rest, because that's when your muscles regenerate and can heal themselves and rebuild. If you don't give your muscles time to rebuild, you're just going to be tearing them down, and you're not giving them time to build the new muscle. So definitely a day off in between. But, the ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, recommends 5 to 7 days a week of exercise, cardiovascular. So aerobic exercise. And basically that's your walking, that is your walk on most days of the week for up to 30 minutes is all you can do. You can break it into 2 different 15-minute sections if you need to. You could do 10 here, 10 there. But starting off there, and your resistance training, you want to take off a day in between and start with 2 days per week and then bump it up.
Awesome. All right. So I think that's all the questions we have there. And those are your references there.
Yeah. My references, I purposely did like this, not your traditional way, because I wanted people, if you're, to be able to go to the actual things and the videos and things like that. So, like I said, and maybe we can do the videos from the PowerPoint presentation I had on there. We can just copy those and put them in there or in the comments or something.
Sure. All right. And I believe that's it, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was awesome. Very, very informative. One of the things that I liked that you shared was, the walking. We did the 19 for 19 day challenge. You said Zumba. So maybe that's something On the Air Sickle can sponsor, is a virtual Zumba event. I don't know. You said, light jogging, cycling. So those are all beneficial workouts. And then I like how you kind of explained, work today, take off tomorrow type situation, or do it, in circuits. That was great to know as well. So Jena, I always give our guests the opportunity to speak to the audience, and I want to give you that opportunity as well to, share a message with our viewers, anything that's on your heart, either to encourage them, motivate them. Come on, Coach Jena, take it away.
All right. Basically, I've been doing this for so long and working with people with many different conditions. And the biggest thing I will say is there's always a chance to improve yourself. I've worked with people with stroke who couldn't move the whole side of their body, and we got them moving again. I've worked with people with severe heart disease. I've worked with people with sarcoidosis and just a whole range of different things. And one thing I want to say is everybody can make improvements, and it just doesn't look the same for everybody. Maybe the biggest improvement for some of my people was the ability to go up and down their stairs in their house without getting out of breath. Some of it was to be able to play with their grandchildren. I had one person, the biggest thing they wanted to do is be able to get up off the floor after they had double knee replacements. So we're not looking at, you don't have to be an Olympic athlete here to see benefits. And I think that's so important. And I certainly, for the sickle cell community, it does not preclude you from having a healthy lifestyle and from making improvements. So yeah, I just want to say that it's always worthwhile to increase your physical activity and benefit your health.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to our on-the-air Sickle Wellness Consultant, Miss Jena Olsen. Jena, thank you so much for sharing so much vital and crucial information that we need to improve our physical activity. Just stay in the green room. We'll be right back with you.
Thanks.
All right. Hey, everybody. So you've been listening to On the Air Sickled. This is season 1, episode 6, Working Out the Cells. You just heard from our On the Air Sickled wellness consultant, Miss Jena Olsen. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, maybe you didn't quite think about it for the show, but you can always follow us on our Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, and YouTube pages. You can join the Facebook group and submit your questions there. Jena will see those questions. She'll be able to get involved with you all on the Facebook group page. If this is beneficial for you guys, we definitely want to be able to share this with not just the sickle cell community, but also with those that just want to support us. So you can also, come to our website, www.ontheairsickled.com. And you can hit the share my story link if you would like to join an episode. Our production team will get in contact with you, get some of your information so that we can see you live on the air. Also, finally, as I always want to share, On the Air Sickled has a mission and a vision. And the mission is to provide awareness for sickle cell in the form of advocacy, right? So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. We want to be able to present that information to you all with our professionals, also from the sickle cell community themselves. Okay, so that's our mission, but our vision is threefold. So the first part of the vision is that we want to make sure that On the Air Sickled is able to reach so many people in so many different places, wherever they are, so that people understand that it's important that they know about the disease and how it works, and that they understand how it may affect them. Right. The second component is that we want to support sickle cell research wherever that may lie, whether it's with NIH or ASH. We want to be able to support nonprofits for sickle cell research. And that doesn't necessarily make On the Air Sickled necessarily different. But what I think does make us different is the third component of our vision, and that is our Flip the Bill campaign that we're trying to start. The Flip the Bill campaign gives us the opportunity to support those members of the sickle cell community. Maybe they're in the hospital and they're unable to pay for an appointment or a medical bill. We want to be able to support them wherever we can financially. For those sickle cell patients that want to pursue their education, we want to perhaps provide for their books. We want to be able to do all these great things, but we need your help. So you can donate to On the Air Sickled through our PayPal link at On the Air Sickled OD. You can give any amount. It goes towards our vision. Again, the threefold, keep On Air Sickled active and going. Make sure that we encourage and support sickle cell research. And then the third component is to flip the bill. We want to provide resources to our sickle cell community, wherever that may be. So thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of On the Air Sickled. Again, 2 weeks time, we will be live again with our next guest. So excited. You don't want to miss it. Invite a friend to the Facebook group page. Learn more information about it. And we'll see you next time on the air.
Hey y'all, you're listening to On the Air Sickled. Our next guest on the air, Mama Alexis, Amy Mason Crew, Audrey Thomas, Tavon Ferris, Juanita Jones, Tawanda Young,